As I've got the TEO-5 temporarily here, I thought it would be a shame not to put it up against my OB6. They're both Oberheims. They've both got an SEM style state variable filter that go from low pass to notch to high pass, low pass, notch, high pass. We've got band pass mode on both of them. On the TEO-5, we go into the menu to do that. They've both got 2 oscillators plus a sub, 2 oscillators plus a sub, and noise. And they've both got 2 envelopes and 2 channels of effects. And they've both got very similar or even identical sequences and ARPs. The ARPs, you can see here, we've got 3 octaves on that one, we've got 3 octaves on this one, we've got 5 different modes. Got the 5 different modes on this one, and the sequences are both 64-step polyphonic, so we're starting off with an awful lot of similarities here, but there are a lot of differences as well, the most obvious of which is that the OB6 is 6 voices and the TEO-5 is 5 voices, but that doesn't account for the vast difference in price. The OB6 desktop is around £2,000, while the TEO-5 is just over £1,000, so almost a reduction of 50%. And for the keyboard version, the OB6 has got 4 octaves and will set you back £2,900, while the TEO-5 comes in at around £1,300, so that's less than half the price, with 3.5 octave keyboard. There is a big difference in price then, so why would you buy an OB6 when the TEO-5 is now on the scene? Before I start comparing the sounds in detail, there are a few important and obvious things to note. In general, the TEO-5 is a much more flexible synth. It's got a mod matrix with 19 slots, and almost everything on the front panel, maybe even everything on the front panel, can be modulated, and you can even modulate the modulation. Whereas on the OB6, we've got much more limited modulation section over here that resembles the polymod section on the Prophet 6, but it is, after all, based on the same platform as the Prophet 6. We've just got 2 sources and 6 destinations for the cross-mod or the polymod section on this. The Aftertouch has only got 6 destinations. The LFO has only got 6 destinations, or 7 if you include the pulse width of 1 and 2. And compare that to the LFOs on the TEO-5, we've got 2 of them and they're much more flexible. LFO 1 on this is monophonic. So we get a single LFO there acting on all the cutoffs. It's modulating the cutoff. But we do have options on this. At the minute it's on note reset. If I put it onto a square, it's more obvious. It's always started at the same position, but if we put this note reset off, every time I hit a key, it's starting at a different point. And that in itself is much more flexible than the OB6. And then we've got LFO2 on this as well. We've got a different LFO on each of the keys. So you can hear that's not a single LFO playing. And we can do something similar on the OB6 using oscillator 2 as the modulation source. So if we bring the modulation in, so there you can hear we've got different rates on different notes. You can do exactly the same thing on the TEO-5. You've just got to go into the modulation matrix to do it. Bringing the modulation down to minus 127, the top notes will be slower and the lower notes will be faster. Beautiful little effect, that, isn't it? And again, that's something you can't do on the OB6. So the TEO-5 in general is just a lot more flexible. We have things on the envelopes. We've got a delay on the envelopes. You've got delay, attack, decay, sustain, release. You don't have that on the OB6. We've also got loopable envelopes. You don't have that on the OB6. So the OB6 really does stick to a much more vintage style of programming. It's almost knob pair function, or it might actually be knob pair function, because the menu system in this is stuff like MIDI clock, alternative tunings, local control, but there's no real program-specific parameters that you access in the menus on the OB6. I'm possibly making this sound a little complex because it is more complex to use than the OB6. Everything with more flexibility is. That's the compromise you've got to think of. But looking at the, looking at the LFOs, for example, so destination, just click on that and then let's wiggle this, shall we? There we go, wiggle something else, and it just does it for you. So it's not as onerous as on some things where you've got to scroll through loads of parameters to set up your modulation, but it's not as instant as it is on the OB6. And that brings me over to the cross mod. So they've both got cross mod. We've got the cross mod section here, and we've got the cross mod or oscillator mod on the TEO-5 down here. But on the TEO-5, it's through zero cross mod, which has a different character to standard cross mod. I've set up a similar patch on both of them with the same interval between oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So bring in the cross mod on the OB6. We're getting a definite change in the pitch there. On the TEO-5, you're not getting the same change in pitch. And that's the big through zero FM trick, as it were. So like on loads of vintage synths, you do have to retune a patch once you've added the cross mod, which you don't have to do on things with through zero FM. But the TEO-5 can also do non through zero FM. I have set up a patch here. Is this the one? Yeah. So if I take the FM off and then I add oscillator 2 to oscillator 1 frequency and then just start adding to that, you can hear it's doing that very, very delicately. So we can do it, but we do have to pile on a few modulation routines. So the TEO-5 can do the FM like the OB6, but it just takes a lot more setting up. As I say, it's much more instant to do anything on the OB6 because there's less to do on it. But the TEO-5 has the through zero FM that the OB6 just can't do. It hasn't got the hardware to do that. Next up then is the effects. They've both got two channels of effects. There's A and B on the OB6, and we've got A and B on the TEO-5. But the TEO-5 to me just sounds much more like effects pedals, much more modern, much more like something like you'd have in your DAW, for example. I'll show you what I mean. If we go to the OB6 first, I'll just show you how it works. We've got effects channels A and B, and we've got various options on A and different options on B, which include spring reverb, plate reverb, room reverb, and hall reverb, as well as some other stuff from effect channel A. So flanges, phases, ring mod, chorus delay, and BBD delay. And we've got very similar stuff on the Take 5. Delay, BBD, tape 1, tape 2, chorus, flanger, phaser, high pass filter. So we do have a high pass filter on the effects in the TEO-5, which we don't have on the OB6. Plus we've got this ring mod. We've got a rotary speaker and lo-fi. So this lo-fi one's nice. You don't get this on the OB6. Try and... It makes it sound like it's on an old tape, basically, but it's quite a fun little thing. I'm not showing it off to its best here. Again, not making it sound its best because I really want to play you the delays and the reverbs. If we come into the tape delay, and there we go, we're going into that space echo territory. So you have to control it. I love those sort of effects. They're great. The tape 2, it's got a bit of a wobble to it, a bit of a warble. So it gets more of a chorusy effect on it. You can hear it wobbling there, drifting a bit. And again, into self-oscillation. You just can't get that on the OB6. And I know what some of you were thinking, well, I can just do that with an effects pedal, but you can't do this with the effects pedal. And let's modulate this, the tone, using an LFO. So go to LFO 1, for example, destination, give that a wiggle. Beautiful, and of course you can sync that with your arpeggiator, your sequencer, or your DAW, because everything's syncable over there. And before I leave the effects alone, something else I wanted to mention was, you might not realize this looking at the front panel, but it does have a distortion. We've got an overdrive over here on the TEO, but if we hold the effect, we get the distortion. The big takeaway for me is that you can modulate all these effects on the TEO-5. All these knobs are assignable in the mod matrix. You can't do that on the OB6. And on the OB6, the effects aren't as glamorous, shall we say, as they are on the TEO-5. So let's start to take a look at the oscillators then and the actual sound of the synth itself. If you saw my Take 5 TEO-5 comparison I released a couple of weeks back, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say here, and that's that the oscillators are set up differently from the start. We've got Prophet style control of the oscillators on the OB6, and we've got Oberheim style control of the oscillators on the TEO-5. But from a hardware perspective, the TEO-5 uses the SSI 2130 chip, whereas the OB6 has got discrete oscillators. It's got each oscillator on its own board. It's being developed specifically for the OB6. Sawtooth to a square on oscillator 1. Then we can change the width of that. Goes through 0. Oscillator 2 is slightly different in that we've got a triangle as well. And then we've got the width of that. So on these you can modulate between a triangle and a sawtooth, for example, or from a sawtooth to a square. And you can do similar on this, oscillator 1. But on the TEO-6 it's completely different. We've got this Oberheim style selection of waveforms. Say Oberheim is a bit like the Prophet 5 as well, isn't it? Let's play something. So you've got sawtooth, or a triangle, or a pulse. Or even when you've got one knob there, you can change oscillator 1 and oscillator 2's pulse width in the menu. And then we can stack them. So you've got a saw and a pulse. In the PWM, I got the saw, the pulse, and the triangle. It's not like there's loads more options on the TEO-5, they're just different options. And you might have noticed there's no mixer section, no level knobs, just like on an Oberheim. You bring them in with the buttons, but as you bring them in, you can see, I wish the OB8 did this, the OB-X8 I should say. You can change the levels just by holding the button. But listening to them, they sound close-ish, but they're not quite the same. The OB6 sounds brighter. So I did get my EQs out to have a look. It's not like something that I'd noticed when I've been playing the instrument itself, but when you sit it next to something else, you do notice it's not quite as fizzy. But listening to them in a musical way, let's put them on a square just to hear something different. Let's go up another octave. So it's not a massive difference that you really do notice because it is only above the 17 sort of kilohertz mark, but so yeah, it's not something you really notice. And when I've been trying to match patches, it's not something that's jumped out at me at all, but it is there. So worth noticing and possibly a reason for the big price difference. So let's take a listen to the filters now, shall we? So starting off with a low pass, then adding some resonance halfway, say. So I'm going to pop it out a bit. Let's go for exactly the same on the OB6. Very similar sounding things, aren't they? Let's try a notch with a chord. Same here. I feel like they're the same thing. Moving that over to a high pass. They do sound very similar, don't they? I'm sure the bandpass is the same, but let's just check it for thoroughness. Put the bandpass on the OB6, just switch there. The bandpass is in the menu there. If we turn it off, bandpass light goes off, on, the light comes on. But let's have a listen. Let's try and get that exact tone on the TEO-5. I feel like I'm losing a little bit of weight at the bandpass on a TEO-5 compared to the OB6. Let's turn the resonance down on them. Yeah, maybe there's more resonance actually on the TEO-5. Let's just crank that up again. So yeah, there is more resonance on the TEO-5, so the filters aren't identical. But yeah, I think that brings me to the end. I've got some notes next to me here, and I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. So the question remains is, which do I prefer? Because I will always get asked that in the comments. And it's an interesting one, this, because not taking price into account, I prefer the OB6, and that's because I just like the hands-on experience, and also it's a very personal thing, this, but would I change my OB6 for a TEO-5? No, and that's because I've got a Take 5. I swapped my Prophet 6 for a Take 5, and now I've got my OB6 and my Take 5 on a rack next to each other. So I've got the flexibility in the Take 5, and I've got the old vintage sort of vintage interface on the OB6. So I've got the best of both worlds, really. Lucky me. If I didn't have the OB6 and I didn't have any other synths, would I get the OB6 or the Take 5? I prefer the OB6 just because I do like that vintage style interface. I know the TEO-5 has got a lot more flexibility in it, but I just like the way that works. Sonically though, there's not a lot in it. I wasn't bothered by the TEO-5 being not quite as bright as the OB6. I didn't notice it until I put them next to each other. It's not really an issue for me. The issue for me is more about the space and what both of them can do and how you access the sounds in them. Some people I know will be bothered that this has got digital amplifiers in it, but it doesn't bother me, as I say. So hopefully that was of some use to somebody somewhere. Hopefully you now understand the differences between the OB6 and the TEO-5, and I finally do as well. I've not put them together before the last couple of days. So if you did enjoy that, please do all those things, subscribe, ring the bell, join me over on Patreon. I've got patches, samples, tutorials, and all the rest of it. And take a look at my starskycar.com website. Again, there's samples and patches, there's free stuff and there's stuff you can pay for. Without begging, it's really nice if people buy some bits and bobs because it does help to support the channel. Anyway, thanks for staying to the very end. I really hope you got some use out of that, and I will see you next time.